Episode 71 with Mike Reilly of Pure Prairie League. What an awesome band. Love these guys. I really appreciated this podcast. And we connected via Zoom. No video this particular podcast, but it's a great listen. I'm sure you're going to really enjoy it. Don't forget about our sponsors. First of all, Morning Buzz Coffee Company based out of Hamilton, Ontario. Awesome coffee. They'll ship right to you. Owned by a couple of great musicians. And please support them at morningbuzzcoffee.buzz. Next, Stickman Clothing Company based out of Regina. Musicians that own this as well. Great family-run business. And they have awesome clothing wear. Check them out at stickmanclothingcompany.com. Also, Music City Canada, based out of London, Ontario. Great bunch of guys that work there. You can get all your musical equipment there. They'll ship right to you as well. MusicCityCanada.com. All right, this is Mike Reilly. He's awesome. We had a great conversation. Pure Prairie League, what a band. I know you're going to really enjoy it. All right, we're here on the podcast with a great fellow. We've been spending the last 45 minutes trying to connect each other via Zoom, and we made it happen. And it's nice to have Mike here on the podcast. Welcome, and I'm glad we got everything working.
Well, thanks to you and your patience and your help. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're all set for Zoom meetings. I think we got it all figured out. You can do 100 of these now.
Well, let's get through the first one and we'll take it from there.
Well, it's great. Where are you located now?
I'm in Sag Harbor, New York, at the east end of Long Island.
Oh, nice. How long have you been there?
On and off since '73, but I've been out here permanently since '08.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
Yeah.
So how are you faring? I know I always like to ask now with COVID happening and all that, and gigs are to a very, very minimum, if anything at all. How's that change been for you?
Yeah, our last gig was in February of last year.
Yeah.
And we're not even looking at anything until at least June 1st, and those are all outdoor shows, and then nothing indoors until at least September 1st. But then, that's a fluid situation, so we'll have to just see how it goes.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to tell on. It looks somewhat positive, but it changes daily, and
you never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
I'm outside of Toronto here, and we're behind in vaccines compared to you. And I know we were supposed to get another big shipment next week, and Pfizer just said, no, you're not going to get it. So I think the U.S. has put a lot of pressure on making sure everyone in the country there is getting vaccines, and everyone else has to get, what comes to them. So,
yeah, well, we can't get it. I mean, I'm in my 70s, and I'm supposed to be in the, in the 1D or whatever group. And they said it's probably going to be, well, you got to make an appointment, and there are no appointments available until at least middle of March.
Wow. And that's now, that could always end up being the middle of April, and then you got to wait. You got to wait for the second shot after that too, and hope there's enough there for the second shot.
Well, I don't know. I mean, now they're coming out with one that's just a single shot type thing, and I may just wind up having to wait for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get both of them. I'd get them today if I could, but and that's one of the things that's kind of forcing me to sequester myself at home.
Yeah.
Keep the forays out into the world at a minimum. I mean, we try to go to the grocery store really early in the morning.
Oh yeah.
It's before the crowds hit, so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not something you want to get. I've known a few people, not really anyone here in Canada, but a few American friends who've had it, and everyone that I've talked to said, yeah, you don't want to get it. It's not fun at all.
No.
Some people breeze through it if you're lucky, and if you're younger. But anything over 50, I think you have to really be careful.
Yeah, I'm in my 70s, so I don't want to take any chances. I mean, I've got a compromised immune system anyway, from a transplant, liver transplant, 15 years ago. So it's like, I can't afford to, take that many chances.
Yeah, no, best to play it smart. I think that's a good way to go. It's funny, taking a look around, there are still a bunch of shows happening, places, tourist destinations like Branson and all those type of places. They're all doing shows and having people come in, and it's odd. I mean, you want to look at them and say, hey, good for you, and great you're doing shows, but then you look at it and kind of go, how are you able to do shows? You know, it's a weird situation.
Yeah, I don't think it's, you know, I mean, there isn't any kind of a uniform response to this whole mess, and I think that's one of the problems, and that's why things are continuing to to escalate in terms of this, this pandemic idea. I mean, I wish I could believe that it was just all BS, but it's not. I mean, I see friends out here getting sick, people in town, and they can't even get into the hospital. So
yeah, and that's
it's scary stuff.
Yeah, and on top of that, you don't want to have anything else go wrong with you, because you can't get into the hospital.
Right. Well, it's a snowball effect too. I mean, if God forbid that I should get sick from something else, but if I get COVID, who knows what the hell's going to happen there? Yeah.
No, you just stay smart and do the right things, and I think all will be fine. So, do you miss doing shows?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been playing road gigs for 50 years, and it's kind of a strange thing. I've never had this much time off ever.
What have you been doing with your time? Your lawn looks pretty good.
Well, the lawn looks great. The garden looks good. The trees are trimmed. We built a new porch on the front, and I mean, we've been doing all the stuff around the house, and also going through the house and cleaning stuff out and doing all that stuff. But which of course that's takes up maybe the first few months or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, then after I realized by the middle of June or middle of summer that this thing isn't going to go away, I didn't get depressed, but I just thought, what the hell? I mean, I'll just be honest with you. I just went, well, I don't feel like doing anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically what I do is I either go down the street and play pool at a friend's boat business in his office. And I know he's been tested and I've been tested, so we're cool on that. Or I'll, I've got a laser pistol range set up in my basement for, for practicing that. And I finally got my studio stuff together and started working in here, working on tunes to try to put together a live record. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, there's always some plus things that happen, I think having some extra time and catching up on some things that you should have done or always wanted to is a good thing. It's just,
it's a double-edged sword.
It certainly is.
I'll tell you what, my relationship with my wife has never been better.
Oh, that's good.
Because we both, she's retired, but she still works 3 days a week, at a little mom and pop shop here in town. And, so she gets her socialization in, although she's behind plexiglass and masked up and stuff like that. But we've been spending so much time together, and it's just been great.
Yeah.
I mean, some people can drive each other nuts, which we do at times, but it's just strengthened our relationship like I can't believe. And it's, that's a blessing.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
And I don't have to get on an airplane or into a rental car or sleep in a hotel bed, without checking it with my bug light and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it's like I said, it's a double-edged sword, man. It's really pretty strange.
Yeah, and it's funny when I've been chatting with a lot of people, and that's the one thing that everyone says they don't miss is getting to the airport and taking the flights and then the rental car and the hotels. And then, the gigs are always great, and everyone looks at things like, oh, it must be fun to be able to travel all over the place. And after a while, and, obviously you've been doing it for a long time, and I've been touring a long time as well. And it's the glamour goes away pretty quick. The greatest thing for me on the road is finding a really good place to go eat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we've been out there so long that we've got things pretty well dialed in terms of restaurants and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So when we know we're going to a certain town, there's a lot of places that we'll we'll find out and jump over there, and at least we know we're going to have a good meal.
I was speaking to Rusty Young just a couple of days ago, and we did a podcast, and we chatted about that same thing. It's like, yeah, every place, every city, you have that favorite spot, and that's the thing. That's the thing next to the gig that you look forward to, and sometimes more than the gig. It's like, oh, I can't wait to go to such and such a restaurant. And
that's true. Well, that's one thing that kind of at least gives you a little bit of a shot in the arm, is that you're going to when you're going back to the same town, that you can go to Mabel's Diner and you're going to get a great meal. So
yeah, and let's hope most of them are still sticking around. So the restaurant industry is really having a tough time.
Yeah, no kidding. That's what puts a lot of these mom and pop places out of business. Which by next year, when we finally get out rolling again, I'm wondering if some of these places are still going to be alive.
Yeah, well, hopefully, and hopefully they get some money sent to them and have a way to figure it out. So we'll have to just wait through it and see. I think there's going to be, from a lot of people I talk to, just starting up the touring process for a lot of bands is going to be difficult, especially if it's a bigger group with, a large, say you take 80 crew on the road with you or something like ridiculous like that. But a lot of those guys have all gotten other gigs and other jobs and trying.
They had to.
Yeah. Yeah. So trying to get those people and those bigger tours back out in the road and rolling again, it's going to be a slow process. I think it's not going to all go at full steam. It's going to take a couple of years to
yeah, exactly. I can't imagine. I mean, the whole Live Nation, that kind of thing is just going to be logistically nightmarish.
Yeah.
So
it's like a reset, really. I think the whole industry needed a bit of a reset. I think there's certain aspects that were out of control, I think. And I think this will bring everyone kind of back to the same playing field again, as far as, agents and bands and venues, all kind of, there's lots of weird stuff that happens. And so hopefully this kind of eases things back down again and, start everyone off in the same playing field, I think.
Well, it makes everybody stop and sit back and think about it and then try to figure out, right when this whole thing hit, and then I guess in the last 6 to 8 months, people were kind of like panicking, trying to figure out, well, what can I do and how can I do it, and so on and so forth. And they're trying to do Zoom band shows and and all that kind of thing. And that's which is I applaud everybody for trying to do that, but it's kind of not the same. But I think the panic is worn off, and it's sort of like, okay, now let's be grown up and intelligent about this and figure out how we're going to do it from the bottom up, from new artists to the big established artists. I mean, can you imagine U2, what they've got to do to put a tour together?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's crazy. It's hard to think of those really big tours right now. And those probably would be the last ones to get going. And I think it's acts that can go out with a small footprint, not a big crew, and kind of get in there and get out safely would be the ones that will really do well off the beginning. And
hopefully, yeah. I mean, that's what, we don't even, we're lucky if we can take a sound man out with us.
Yeah.
We are our crew. So we bring our guitars and stuff and, set up our gear and get in there and get it done.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's going to be good for you and getting back going again, because I think a lot of venues are going to be looking for that type of situation.
Absolutely. I think so. But once again, if you've got let's say we do a lot of theaters and performing arts centers and that. So if you've got a 300 to 1,500 seat hall, if they're still going to limit the capacity to 25 or 50%, number one, how do they make any money?
Yeah.
Number two, they they want the bands to take less money because they can only get so many people in, and the bands have basically got, we have a set amount that we have to just get out the door.
Yeah.
Just to make it worth it for us. And we're not talking about big paydays here. We're talking about just, gig pay and paying the expenses and,
Yeah, the model's not great when you have to limit your capacity. I own with my family, we own a venue here in Canada, and we got the same thing. It just until we feel that we can probably open fully again, you don't make money when you're at 50%. You don't make money when you're at 60% capacity. No. So why do it to lose money or break even? It just doesn't really make sense. So I think it's going to be. I think there's ways around it, and I think if you can bring an act that doesn't cost a lot, but may still bring some people in and kind of keep you going. But there's all these other things of insurance and all these other costs that are skyrocketing. And
I mean, nothing's going to stay fixed either. Everything's going to be more expensive, and where's it all going to come from?
Yeah, everything's more expensive, and there's less money to give out. So it's not a good.
That's it.
That doesn't work that way.
The competition for fewer gigs and more acts is going to be just cutthroat. I mean, this band's been together 50 years.
Yeah.
So, we have sort of a built-in fan base, all over the country, for instance. But and we tour a lot with Poco and Firefall, Atlanta Rhythm Section, Orleans, Little River Band, groups of our ilk and our age group, sort of.
Yeah.
And as a package thing, it works out really well because people get a lot of music in one night, and it works out. But for a new artist, boy, I can't imagine the struggle. And for the big artists, they're just going to have to sit around and twiddle their thumbs until something starts to shake out.
Yeah. Hopefully it all comes together smoothly, and it's going to take a bit of time. But the good thing is everybody's anxious to get back out and see some live music and see a show. And I think once we're able to, it's really going to do well, and the people who can stick it out will really do well. So
I think so. I think that. It's there's I don't see talking to Rusty and some of those guys in those other bands that we work a lot with. I don't see anybody losing their enthusiasm for playing.
No.
I mean, come on, it's what we do, but everybody's been around long enough to know that if we have to do something else, I guess we will, or scale it back to a thing, but nobody's talking about retiring and, being done with it.
Yeah, I only talked to one person, actually, John Cowan. Do you know John Cowan?
Sure.
Yeah. So I did an interview with podcast with him. Surprisingly, he was like, yeah, I'm getting so used to being at home that I'm not anxious to go out at all.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So you want to play, but it's been nice having that time at home, and I think it's that same thing. It's that thinking about getting on the plane again and going through all, security was bad enough. Now, what is it going to be like now? Someone's coughing next to you and you're going to be nervous. And it's like,
well, that's the thing. It's like it's a scary deal. So I'm impatient, but I'm content to wait until we don't have to worry about sitting next to somebody that's hacking up their lungs and wearing a mask and thank God they at least did something with the service animals.
Yeah, I know. That's true. I was waiting for that, and that finally happened. So it was a excuse for a lot of people to bring their pets on the planes.
Oh yeah, well it just got crazy. I mean, it's like even if you decide to treat yourself and fly first class, you're sitting next to somebody that's got a German Shepherd at their feet. It's like, for Christ's sake, come on, let's get real about this. Things got out of hand, out of control, and I think that it's, like you said, it's a reset, and I hope that everybody resets from soup to nuts.
Yeah.
And not just our industry, but everything. It's going to be the new normal is going to be a new abnormal, but it's going to be the new normal. So, get used to it.
So let's go back. Let's leave this COVID chat behind and go and chat about Pure Prairie League and what a great band. You've been with them. It would have been 50 years last year for touring.
Yeah, when the band started touring, we did our first gig in September of 1970. Wow. No, 69.
69, yeah.
Yep.
And you joined the group, was it in 73?
72.
Yeah, 72.
Yeah, I was in England for a year. Me and the piano player, Mike Connor, who's since passed away.
Yeah.
We were in England for a year doing a project over there. And we toured with David Bowie. And when we came back in May of 72, the Pure Prairie League was just getting ready to go in the studio in Toronto, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
To record the Bustin Out album. And so they called me and Mike Connor and, said, hey, can you guys get up here and let's get this thing on. And that's when they actually became a band with real members. The Billy Hines, the drummer, and Mike Connor and I joined at that time. And, then they finally had a full touring unit.
It was interesting. I didn't realize you had recorded in Toronto, and I just was reading a little bit, doing a little bit of research before we connected here. And it's like, oh, wow, they did that album in Toronto. And then there was a note that a good friend of mine who's a steel player played on the album. His name is Al Briscoe.
Al Briscoe, of course, yeah.
And I've worked with Al a bunch of times and know Al very well. I read that. So I didn't know that after this many years that he had played on that album. So I'll have to give him a shout and I'll chat with him about that.
Yeah, please do. I know our steel player John David Call is in contact with Al. Quite a bit, and because Al makes cases for steel guitars.
Yeah, he's got a steel guitar shop up here. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's got road cases and stuff like that. So John, wears through one every couple of years and gives Al a call, and he sends one down, and we're back out there doing it. So
awesome. Yeah, that was a great surprise when I read that. I didn't realize that. So what was it like at the beginning with Pure Prairie League? Obviously, you're a country rock band, and it's interesting, like you and Poco and those type of groups certainly had that country rock thing. But you think of country music now, and even country rock in your category is way too country for country now. But
we're way too rock. I mean, most of the music coming out of Nashville is pop rock.
Yeah.
It's like other than using a twang and an accent, it's it's produced like rock records, and
Yeah, exactly. So what it was like touring back then? Obviously you had this new band and you're getting out there. And did you have any idea that things were heading the way they were heading, or did you just enjoy being with the band?
Well, I mean, when I joined the band, I had known those guys since they started. I saw their first gig in Cincinnati, Ohio, in '69. As a matter of fact, they were one of our opening acts at this place called Ludlow's Garage, and I watched their set from right in front of the stage, and I went, "Wow, I love this stuff. I want to be in this band someday." And a couple of years later, there I was.
Excellent.
So. Yeah, it was. But, when we started touring, the band toured a little bit after the first album and just used a couple of friends, a bass player from L.A. and, a drummer. Well, actually, Billy Hines had joined them and on the club circuit and then went out with them. But, Pure Prairie League actually opened up a show for Malo at Carnegie Hall in '71. Wow. And we're everything but booed off the stage. And, I thought, boy, this is not an auspicious start for a group. But when we started touring in '72, we had signed with the biggest college booking agency in the country at that time, Variety Artists International, out of Minneapolis.
Yeah, Variety. I remember them. Yep.
And so they put us in colleges. And by '73, right after Craig had left due to the draft situation that he had, it's like, well, are you going to break up or what's going on? It's like, no, we're not going to break up. We're going to, get another guy and join the band, and we're gonna do it. So we started doing college shows, and it got to be, 250, 275 college dates a year.
Wow.
For about 10 years, all through the 70s and into the 80s.
Yeah, college gigs that was a big deal back in those days. And I know even up here, there are a lot of colleges, even when I was younger, I know they had bands all the time. Obviously, I don't think it's as much of a thing nowadays, but that obviously kept you really, really busy, and that was like a foundation of growing your act.
Bingo. That was the whole thing. I mean, we played. RCA dropped us in '73 when they thought that when Craig left, that's the end of this band.
Yeah.
And so we're out there humping it on the college circuit all over the country, and jamming Amie down people's throats every night.
Yeah.
So the next thing you know, they're playing it on college radio stations. And, those kids were like between 18 and 21 years old or whatever, 22 years old. So, that's a lot of people in the 70s in college at that time grew up listening to Pure Prairie League and saw us in concert in their field house or in their auditorium or whatever. And so, plus colleges, they had a decent budget. They paid decent money.
Yep.
And, some of the crowds we had in these colleges, I mean, you fill up a 10,000 seat basketball arena.
Yeah.
Plus we used to carry our own sound and lights, so we know we sounded good.
Yeah.
It just worked out. That built our fan base, and it built our careers as a band. And we're eternally grateful for that. Thank you, college.
Yeah. The last person I heard that really did well with that was Dirk Bentley, country singer Dirk Bentley, and they used to do just a ton of college dates, and they would do like an opening spot for, they could be opening up for George Strait or anyone like that on a tour. And as soon as they'd done, they'd wrap their stuff up and drive, a couple 100 miles to get to some college somewhere, and they play at midnight for some college party, and they do that all the time. And it's it was their foundation of really building an audience.
That's the deal.
Yeah.
You got to put the miles in.
Yeah, you certainly do. It takes the work. And obviously it's good for the band. You're playing a lot, and the band gets really, really tight.
Absolutely. And in those days, we were all young enough to figure about, we figured, well, let's get creative here. I mean, we're writing our own tunes. Let's get that process accelerated and come up with some more stuff, because the record companies at that time wanted an album a year from you.
Yeah.
So when RCA re-signed Pure Prairie League in '75, it was like boom, 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 let's go, an album a year.
So who did a lot of the writing in the group? Was it a group effort, or did we have?
All the arrangements were a group effort, but the writing depended on who was the lead singer at the time. Craig Fuller had written a lot of the first two records,
yeah.
And George Powell, the rhythm guitar player, was basically a fledgling songwriter and had a few tunes on those records. Even more so when Craig left. When we hired Larry Goshorn in '73 to replace Craig, Larry was a songwriter and added a little more bluesy influence to it. But he grew up in Cincinnati in the same area that we did, so we had a real simpatico with our styles in that. And but we wanted to, the Pure Prairie League's approach was sort of like Northern Kentucky, Southern Ohio,
yeah.
Rock and roll meets, Northern Kentucky, Southern Ohio bluegrass and hillbilly music and that. And that's what we grew up listening to and grew up playing. So, we wanted to kind of keep that focus in that direction for the band, but we also wanted to be able to expand on that.
Yeah.
Because we're becoming better players and, and trying harder to work on songs and stuff. So
when did you actually start playing? How young were you when you picked up an instrument?
14. I was 14.
14. And what drove you to do that?
Well, that was the year that the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, right around my birthday in February. Yeah. And then, and that was just like, holy cow, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
And I went to, I was kind of big for my age. So I snuck into a nightclub in Newport, Kentucky to hear Lonnie Mack play. Lonnie Mack is a great guitar player and blues singer, and he was from Indiana, and he used to play in these clubs and bars and stuff. And I snuck in and I heard him play and sing, and I just went, "That's it. This is what I'm going to do." And went to Sears and bought a Silvertone bass guitar with the speaker and the amp in the case.
Yeah.
And boy, I wish I had that now.
Oh,
but that was it for me.
Wow. And what made you decide bass?
Drums were too much of a pain in the ass to carry around.
Good choice.
And we already had a guitar player in the little high school band that I was, that I had put together. So, it's like, okay, nobody's playing bass. Great, let's do it.
Awesome. It's interesting choices when you're young on why you decide to choose whatever instrument it was. It's interesting, and because there's a lot of guitar players out there, but when you've got a bass or drums or steel guitar, any of those type of instruments, where it's like those are conscious decisions to play that instrument. It's interesting on the thought and why that happens.
Well, I have to admit that, watching Paul McCartney play and sing, and he played so melodically and sang so great, because they're kind of counterintuitive. You're playing the bass and you're playing these bass notes, but you're not playing melody notes, but you have to sing melodies. So I worked on that. I started out singing and, taught myself how to play bass and sing along with it. And it just went on from there. So, but McCartney was one of the first to blow my mind in terms of the art of playing bass and singing, and then from there on, Jack Bruce and, all the other great bass players. And I was listening to a lot of jazz. So, that made me want to practice more and more. And yeah.
Great. Good choice. I love.
Well, knock wood, it's stuck with me. I mean, let me see what's in back of me here. There's a bunch of basses and a upright, stuff like that. So
would you go to a bass now? Would you play live?
Well, live, I carry I had a Fender PJ built, a Precision Jazz. It's a jazz neck and a precision body and precision and jazz Seymour Duncan pickups.
Yeah.
Because that's just it's a great American standard maple neck. I had him build it for him because I needed a good road guitar. My '64 jazz bass was getting beat to shit, and so I had to, take that off the road.
Yeah.
And the Alembic was really heavy.
Oh yeah.
And I have a John Entwistle model Alembic that I had made for me in '77, and I love that guitar and it sounds great, but boy, is it heavy.
It's different with like guitar players and bass players. Even if you had a heavier guitar, it's because guitar players are always repositioning where the weight distributes on your body, right? Because it's forward, it's back, it's here. But bass, it's pretty well, you're kind of locked in one spot.
This is where it is. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and the weight is a big deal after a while, and that makes having a nice light instrument makes it much easier.
And well, you have to have some heft, to the body to make it resonate and talk. But on the other hand, you don't want to be, slogging around with this, millstone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's not as if you can change up and play left-handed.
Yeah. Well, wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah.
I take a few different guitars with me, depending on what the gig is and stuff like that. I mean, if we do like a scaled down acoustic type show, I'll bring an acoustic bass with me and play that. But it's just sort of, that's why I've got all these back here, because I pick them all up and I play them, for half an hour each and put them back on the stand. And for recording, it's great to have a few different axes too, to get a few different sounds.
Yeah, that's for sure. Let me ask you a question that I usually save for the end, but since we're talking about instruments, if you had to, this is kind of a hypothetical question, but I like to ask all musicians I have on the podcast. If you had to leave your house in a hurry for a reason, can only take one instrument with you, which one would it be?
My 64 Jazz.
Yeah. That's the one.
And my 1920 Gibson mandolin and my 1964 Martin D28.
You could probably.
So I'd make room for it.
Yeah, the mandolin's
But
like.
you get only one, so there you go. Yeah.
Good. So, as far as Pure Prairie League goes, eventually, a young lad by the name of Vince Gill joined the group. How did that?
98.
How did that all come together? How did you manage to see him and decide that was going to be the new person in the band?
Well, it was it was sort of an organic progression. By the time we did the live album in '77, and then the Just Fly album at the end of '77,
yeah.
early '78, Larry and Timmy Goshorn, who were the guitar players in the band and brothers, they were kind of tiring of the road. It was those were days of excess as well. So,
yeah.
But they had sort of reached the end of the road rope and decided they were going to, just do a local thing on their own as the Goshorn brothers, which they did and were very successful.
Yeah.
I always kind of saw Pure Prairie League because they started out without a real full rhythm section. I always saw it as sort of a fluid, blob.
Yeah.
Always morphing into something else, and see where it goes from here. And so when they decided to leave, George Powell, the rhythm guitar player, who was one of the original guys that also left, the steel player, John Call, was gone because his back fell apart on him right after the live record. So, we were basically at one of those crossroads again. What are we going to do? And it's like, well, let's, there's plenty of people that can play, and, let's see what's going on. And I had been playing in the summertime with Vince down in Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach with Byron Berline and Sundance.
Oh, neat.
And so we were auditioning guitar players in LA in '78, and we had gone through a whole bunch of people, and sort of at the end of the day, this one guy showed up to audition, and he brought Vince with him. So, because
that's a mistake.
Yeah, well, Vince had opened up shows for us in a bluegrass band he had in Oklahoma City called Mountain Smoke, and we had him come and sit in with us. And I offered him a gig on the spot back in '76. I said, "Man, if you ever want to play rock and roll, here's my number."
Yeah.
So in '78, the guy that was with him didn't really cut the mustard, as they say. But Vince said, we said, "Hey man, we're done for the day. You want to jam a little bit?" He says, "I've got my guitar in the car. I'll go get it." We wound up playing for 4 hours, and I reiterated the offer, and he accepted.
Wow. I wonder how his friend felt.
He probably knew. I mean, the guy, it's like, we've been pretty seasoned after, being on the road for 5 or 6 years. And so we, it took a lot to keep up with us. It still does.
Yeah.
So, so he just couldn't keep up with us, and we, moved on. And so Vince joined the band, and he had a friend that lived in LA that was a really good songwriter and a good singer, and he played steel guitar and saxophone. So I thought, well, here we go. It's serendipitous. And, so we went in the studio, did our last album for RCA called Can't Hold Back.
Yeah.
Recorded that at Criteria Studios in Miami with the Bee Gees in the next room and Julio Iglesias in the other room and Johnny Cougar in the other room.
Wow.
So that was a trip. But, we did that first record with Vince without a steel guitar because RCA wanted us to start competing with bands like Ambrosia and Player and, that was right at the height of the big disco scare.
Yeah.
That shit almost caught on. So
almost.
So so we played with a bit more of a pop inclination, but we even had some stuff on there that was sort of jazzy and that. But I mean, the Can't Hold Back was a severely overlooked record. But that was the end of the road for us in RCA, especially when they spelled the name of the band wrong on the record.
Did they? Oops.
So,
oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
And so so we wound up moving on from there and signed with our friend Bruce Bird, who was running Casablanca Records for Neil Bogart.
Yeah.
So we go from RCA to Casablanca. That was a weird Christmas party with Kiss and Donna Summer and
Yeah, I guess it would be. It's funny going back to you mentioning hiring a steel player who plays sax. I mean, that's not something that you see very often.
No, actually, he was a lead guitar player. He was a very good instrumentalist on pretty many fronts.
Yeah.
And very prolific. He still is a very prolific songwriter, and we wore him out in a year.
Did you?
Between playing and writing and we put him to work. We ran him like the Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah, it's interesting how you can either handle that kind of workload. Or you can't, and it's tough. I mean, especially even on the road, you can either handle being on the road and having long hours and just go, and it may be good for a while, but there's not too many people can really stick it out for a long time. It's you have to have something in you that you just can't learn. It just has to be a part of you.
Well, it's called discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to, it's all fun and games, it's a lot of fun and games, but, you also have to realize that, wow, this could really, this could make me old quick. And it made a lot of people that had been in my band and other bands old very quick, or it killed them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it and, keep up with things. I mean, Vince had never even taken an aspirin in his life.
Yeah.
Never drank a beer. Until he joined Pure Prairie League.
You broke him in. So what was it like having Vance? How did that change the band at all? Was there any difference there, or it was just we got a new front guy?
There was a difference because Vince was a bluegrasser at heart, but he played guitar like Larry Carlton.
Yeah. I
mean, he was just a monster, and he could sing anything and play anything. He could play fiddle and mandolin and banjo and everything else. So it fit the Pure Prairie League flexible mold, and it was great having him in the band. The singing was great.
Someone's talking. The computer's talking to you.
I think it's my Sonos speaker that has Alexa in it.
Oh yeah.
I thought I disabled that. Anyway, Vince. I mean, some of the songs that he wrote for the Can't Hold Back album, including the title track, was like it had a lot of R&B and jazz influence in it. And but then we did songs like White Line by Willie P. Bennett and things like that were just pure country. And he sang everything so well. And then like the songs that Pat Boland and I wrote together, Restless Woman and a couple of others, which we're still doing on the, Goodbye So Long, we still do on the road now, which we revived a couple of years ago. So there were some great songs and lots of fun to play. And Vince was just, because he could play so well, just brought the level of the band's musicianship up several notches, and sent Pure Prairie League into the 80s with a guns blazing, ready to go.
It's interesting. In many cases, either if you're in a band situation or if you're recording or whatever, but you have someone that comes in who's a smoking player, it really makes everyone, think, oh, I better start picking things up here, because it's pretty easy to be complacent after playing a bunch of years in a band, and you've got your thing, and you do it, but you don't realize sometimes after a while it just becomes routine. But having that extra little spark really sometimes is that thing that really makes everybody just drive along a lot quicker.
Yep. Before I joined Pure Prairie League, I moved up to Woodstock right after the festival.
Yeah.
And in 1970, and there were several bars in town, and the band lived there, Dylan lived there, the guys in Elephant's Memory. There was music everywhere. The Fabulous Rhinestones and all those guys. I mean, there was music everywhere. So every night of the week, whether we had a club gig or not, we'd go sit in all these bars and stuff like that. And a lot of players were really good R&B players and jazz players. And you had to up your game to be able to play with people like Warren Bernhardt and Mike Maneri and David Sanborn, and or Dave Holland says, "Hey man, let's do a project with electric bass and acoustic bass." So what do you say no to Dave Holland or Jack DeJohnette? So, yeah, you definitely have to up your game.
And it's amazing that sometimes you don't realize you have something in you until you're put in a situation where you have to actually give it a bit more, and then it's like, oh, where did that come from?
Fire, bub.
Yeah, it's neat. Being in those, I've been in those circumstances before where you'd have to rise to an occasion, and it's sort of like, oh, it's always been there. It just, you needed someone to bring it out. It's like having a really good producer that knows how to bring something out of a player or a singer. You can tell. I've produced a lot of stuff, and some people you can tell whether that's the best they got in them. I don't know what it is. If it's an intuition, you just kind of. But then there's other people you realize, I think I can get more out of this person.
Absolutely. Well, once again, we pushed Vince's boundaries in a lot of ways, and it made him grow as a musician. And, and still, to this day, we see Vince when we play the Grand Ole Opry because he makes sure that he's the host.
Awesome.
So that he can sit in and play with us.
Yeah.
But, he's always been very gracious and generous about, Pure Prairie League taught me about rock and roll and about touring and about business and about, he basically got us start learning those kind of things and stretching and finding those things inside of him that, that brought him to where he is today. But, he was a talent like that is just undeniable, unmistakable, and, completely, you'd have to be blind, deaf, and dumb to not see that kind of just pure raw talent. So,
yeah.
And I'm thrilled for Vince now that he's with the Eagles.
Oh, isn't that amazing? Yeah. It's a good fit.
Yeah. Well, it's a perfect fit.
Yeah.
They're the world's greatest cover band of themselves, and and Vince fits in like hand in glove. It's like I loved Glenn, and Deacon does a very good job. I used to be Deacon's scoutmaster.
Oh no way!
But,
that's great.
But Vince just has picked up that mantle and wears it well and carries it. I think he lifts the level up. I see him every time they come to New York to the Garden and stuff like that, and it just it just kills me. So I'm thrilled for him.
So what? Eventually, Vince left the group, and so what was that? So was Vince moving on to do something else?
Yep. After 3 years or 3.5 years on the road, and we did 3 records, we had some good success with Let Me Have You Tonight, and Still Right Here in My Heart, and a couple of other tunes that charted up in the top 10. But Vince was also feeling his oats, and he said, I think it's time for us to, it's time for me to move on. And, we've never stopped anybody from doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so, and by that time, it was kind of obvious that Pure Prairie League had become a bit of a springboard, for a lot of people, and which is great.
Yeah.
It enriched the band and enhanced the band and the band's brand, and our name and gave these other guys a chance. So when Vince left, I was looking around and found a guy named Gary Burr. He was in Connecticut. He was a great songwriter and, wound up playing with Carole King and co-writing, 5 or 6 of Ringo's records and played with Ringo. And, he's a country music Hall of Fame songwriter in that. And so I got Gary in the band, and I had hired half of Kenny Loggins' band.
Oh, yeah.
The sax player and the drummer and the guitar player. That's so in the 80s, after Vince left, we, continued to, we were without a record deal, but we continued to work on tunes and continued on the road, until 87, basically, which is when we did a final project. I thought it was going to be final because it was sort of sliding into that, well, the next step is down to playing clubs.
Yeah.
And so, I decided to retire the band at the end of 87. We did a project called Mementos for a CD manufacturer in Dublin, Ohio. And I got Vince and the Goshhorns and Craig and George, everybody that had been in the band up to those, up through the years, to come in and reprise some songs and play some new songs. So that was that was going to be our thank you and good night.
Yeah.
And we figured, I was ready to start raising a family, and Craig had kids, and we were thinking, okay, let's put this to bed, and, consider it a job well done, and we're happy to be a footnote in musical history. And then by 99, our kids were growing up, and our wives were getting sick and tired of us being around the house. So Craig and I put the band back together, with Mike Connor and a couple of other guys that we had known from Nashville, and and here we are still. It's 2021. I can't believe it. It's 20 years.
It's interesting because obviously the market has changed. Different types of venues to play at. The casino market is big, and the performing arts centers, as you mentioned, back in the 70s and 80s, those weren't really, casinos were like Vegas and Elvis, and there really weren't all those places to play all over the place.
Sure.
Now it's the options to play, and people want to hear things from their youth. I mean, that's such an important part of people's lives, is listening to Prairirie League, and it's amazing how that music stays with you for so long. And it's really a huge part of your life.
Yeah, that's the nail on the head. When we play these shows, the demographic goes from high school to, basically almost wheelchair.
Yeah.
And, we look at the people, when we sing these songs, and they're, some of them, their eyes are kind of like either closed or kind of rolled back in their head, and they're back in their college days, and they're singing every word and stuff like that. I mean, that's incredibly gratifying. And it's, wow, talk about being jazzed for what you do, and, being validated.
Yeah.
To know that you're appreciated and your music's appreciated. So, yeah.
And it's nice you can come back and you sound great. And, there's certain groups, and we've all seen them and heard them, where, the singer gets back or the band's back, and it's just not great.
Yeah, well, yeah, I hear you. But, and we certainly don't mention names or cast aspersions, but some people would have been better off staying at home.
Yeah.
But then again, that's God bless them for trying. Yep. And, we've just been lucky. Every iteration of Pure Prairirie League, even since 99, the band's always gotten better. I mean, the unit that we've got right now is just kick ass and take names. We finally hired a new keyboard player a couple of years ago, and that just rounded out what we've been missing.
Yeah.
And the steel guitar player, the original steel player, John Call, is playing with us. And Donnie Clark, the guitar player, has been with us for 15 years. Scott Thompson, who's a monster drummer, has been with us for 8-9 years. And it's just, the band is tight. The vocals are great.
Yeah.
we're working on new material, and we have no reason to want to just crawl into a corner and whimper.
Yeah, that's awesome. What was it like back in the day when you were on the Merv Griffin show and those type of shows back then? There's some great videos online I've watched, and the hair and the whole, it's awesome. What is it like performing on those shows?
Well, most of those things were pantomime type situations, except for Don Kirshner's rock concert, and Austin City Limits, which was great.
Yeah.
But the other things were basically, they were publicity performances to promote an album. So we did everything from Solid Gold to the Dolly Parton show.
Yeah.
And rock concert and Merv Griffin and Mike Douglas and John Davidson, and they were fun. And being a member of SAG-AFTRA, all of a sudden I found out, wait a minute, there's some money there, and so they send me a couple bucks every month, and for those old shows that we did in the '80s, and that's great. That's like, thank you, free money.
Yeah, gravy.
yeah, no kidding.
So
I'd like to get a hold of some of those shows. I know that a friend of mine who does a lot of archiving work with old shows has volunteered to do some research and pull some of these shows for me. So
I always mention, it comes up a lot, but for young entertainers now, it's such a great thing because everyone's recording the show with their cell phones. They can go online and see everything from the night before. There's all this footage, more than you could ever want to have. But back in the day, that just didn't exist. It's hard to find masters and anything to play them on, and all that. So I think the younger generation really has it lucky to be able to have that type of archive of their work. It's just not available for a lot of other acts.
Well, it was a smart guy that said you can't go forward unless you look in the past and look backward.
Yeah.
And especially for artists and songwriters and stuff these days, I think it certainly should be part of their entire makeup. I mean, there's so many YouTube and Instagram type artists.
Yeah.
That it's like, they're only into it for likes and whatever. I'm not a huge social media guy or even a fan. But I see some stuff, and it blows my mind how that is popular, but that's today. That's what is going on in 2021, and God bless them all, and best of luck. I feel lucky that we're still around after 50 years and can still go out and play. We don't have to make a living at it, but it certainly helps.
Yeah.
And it's generational, and it's all on the wheel. But it's just interesting to watch.
Yeah, and it's the younger generation and YouTube stars, and some of them are famous, and they could be famous singer or whatever, and they never played in front of an audience before.
Oh yeah.
It's bizarre.
Oh, that manufactured boy bands and all that kind of stuff back in the day. They were put together to basically be a novelty or whatever, and it's there wasn't longevity built into that equation at all.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, let's hit it, make some dough, splash, and then boom, boom. And now you've got guys, that used to be in those boy bands that are out doing insurance commercials. And,
yeah. It's funny now that you look back, and it's not funny, but it's interesting that bands are really kind of rare. Like a band where it's not just a lead singer and someone playing behind them, but this is a band that where everybody partakes, and it's part of the sound and that type of thing. It's That's my favorite thing. Seeing a band that's been together for a long time and they're seasoned and there's just something about their sound, right?
Right.
It may not be perfect. It may not, every note might not be but it's a combination of these group of people performing for a long time, that you just can't beat that. That's just something that's just awesome.
It's authentic.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, even people like Chris Stapleton, he has a touring band and all that stuff, but I mean, he played in bands for years.
Yeah.
And a lot of artists like that. Dave Matthews, that's a great band. There's lots of guys that have been playing for years that I'm so glad they are still playing, and there's nothing that gets you like, because a band creates its own energy.
Yeah.
Whereas a solo performer is in the white hot spotlight the whole time. They've got to dance, they've got to sing, they've got to tell jokes, they've got to do the whole vaudeville thing, and it's, it's good luck. I mean,
yeah, I know. It's nothing. It's great where you can just take an act and you can put them anywhere and they can perform and entertain. But there's so many acts now that unless you strip the lights and the sound and the dancers and everything away, there's nothing left.
Right. I mean, there's a market for it. There's an audience for it. It's just not ours or mine, and once again, I don't begrudge anybody, but it's just the times. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yep. The one question I thought would be interesting with a band that's been going for so long, and obviously you joined a few years later. It must be interesting who carries the name, right? Like who ends up being the band, right? Because there's lots of different members over the years, right? That must be a complicated issue for a lot of groups. But all of a sudden it's sort of like there's this core bunch of guys and there's this person, that person, but then there's someone has to carry the name or who's in charge of Pure Prairie League, and obviously that must be you, right?
Yeah, it was sort of a de facto thing. I mean, I basically got elected Pope of this dump by default. So, hey, who elected you Pope of this dump? But yeah, I mean, I always believed in that band, and when I joined it, it seemed just sort of like predestined that I was going to wind up being the band leader.
Yeah. Because
it's like, let's keep these guys together. Let's keep our eyes on the ball, and let's do this. And I always had that. I don't know. It was just part of my personality, I guess. I mean, I've always tried to have been a benevolent dictator.
Yeah.
But I mean, every band also needs a band leader, and that I've not shied away from making some tough decisions, and I've made plenty of mistakes, but that's just part of the learning process and the growing process, and luckily there are still some people that can shoulder that, and
yeah. Well, someone's got to be the leader.
Yeah, well, I truly believe that. Yeah. I mean, like I said, benevolent democracy is, or benevolent dictatorship. Bands that try to be a democracy wind up, basically ready to slash each other's throats. So
yeah.
It's not a democracy. It's like, everybody needs guidance. Like every good young band needs a good producer. And we were lucky enough to get people like John Boylan and John Ryan and the Albert brothers and, in Miami and stuff like that. We had people that were sympathetic to what we were trying to do and let us do it, and actually got us to do it better than we knew how we were going to do it. So, it's there. Every band needs a leader. Every country needs a leader.
Yes.
Hello.
That's true.
Good, bad, or different. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. Well, let's wrap up on a final question here, and I appreciate your time, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of your group, and it's so great to see you out performing, and I hope that you be able to get back out on the road real soon, because we all miss it a lot, I know. But obviously the bass question of, what instruments you would take out was one of my final questions, but this is a question I like to ask a lot of people, and I've known you've played so many different types of places, but is there a venue or place or a city or country that you've always wanted to perform at and you've never had the chance?
Well, this band never got to play in Japan or the Far East, or Australia or New Zealand. And actually, Pure Prairie League's never gotten to tour Europe.
Oh, really?
So, it's always been, well, there's the possibility of it, but things never shook out, in terms of being able to afford to do it.
Yeah.
We never made enough money to be able to afford it ourselves and just, take it as it may. But I think the favorite place that we've ever played is Red Rocks, in Colorado, where we played there a dozen times with so many different groups. And, it's just a magical place. And literally magical.
Yeah.
And I think that's my favorite place to play. But, we have fans all over the world, and that's a nice thing. And especially these days with YouTube and my face and all that other stuff, it's like people still get a little dose of Pure Prairie League, which is good for anybody.
And it's nice that you have a lot of musician fans too. That's always nice for a band. I posted that I was having an interview here today, and a lot of my musician friends were commenting on what songs they used to play, and it's always nice that when you're a group and you're appreciated by your peers.
It's true. It's true. When we found out that people were cutting our songs, like Travis Tritt and Randy Scruggs did a version of Amie.
Oh, nice. I'll have to check that out.
And it was great. Yeah. And Dave Matthews used to do Amie in their set, and Keith Urban, and a lot of people used to play songs of Pure Prairie Leagues in their set. And that's really, once again, gratifying, validating, and I applaud their good taste.
Well said. Well, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast, and this is your first podcast, so that was pretty awesome.
Well, that cherry has now been popped. Yeah. So maybe I can do these a little easier in the future. I'll even see if I can get used to Zooming and stuff like that. But I really appreciate you're taking the time and also basically keeping the word alive and keeping the faith with Pure Prairie League.
Definitely. If people want to find out what's happening with Pure Prairie League, what's the best way? Obviously, you have the website, and I'm sure.
Yeah, which I updated last year, and now I have to update it again to get a current touring schedule and news blogs and stuff like that on there. But that's the best place to go.
Yeah,
is pureprairieleague.com.
Excellent. Well, hopefully you'll get into my neck of the woods, and I'd love to come out and see you, and I'd love to see a show. So let's keep our fingers crossed. And did you ever do shows up? I'm sure you did. Did you do many Canadian tours? And
yeah, we used to go across all the Jubilee theaters from one side of the country to the other. Yeah. We did Toronto Place several times outdoors.
Yep.
We played some clubs in Toronto in the area. We've done a lot of stuff. We toured a lot with Marshall Tucker and Charlie Daniels and did a lot of those Jubilees.
Yep.
We did Calgary Stampede a bunch of times. So yeah, we've had great success in Canada. We actually got a bunch of our equipment stolen in Canada one time.
Did you really? No.
Yeah. All of a sudden guitar cases started showing up 2 years later once the internet hit and eBay hit and all that kind of stuff, it's like, hey, you guys interested in an old guitar case? There's no guitar in it, but
wow.
Yeah. But hey,
it happens.
Yeah, it does.
Well, thanks.
But on a good, once again, I think this podcast is a great idea, and I'm glad you're, getting a good. I looked, on the site and stuff like that, and you've got a great array, just a wide range of subjects and people to talk with, and I think it's a great thing you're doing. So
thank you, I appreciate it. It's been great for me. The conversations have been wonderful. I'm always very inspirational, and I think we all have something to learn from one another, and it's great to be able to sit down and have a regular chat, because you don't usually have, especially even if you meet someone at a show, you don't have time to sit and chat for an hour. No. Doesn't happen. So,
well, once again, I may have to look into this whole this whole idea a little more, because I think it's a great format, and it's a great venue for artists, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. And you got your Zoom thing figured out, so you're all set.
Hopefully, we'll see.
Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it. And to stay on, I'll just end this up, but I will say a proper goodbye. But thanks for joining in the podcast, and keep trucking. We'll hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.